Got a tiger on a leash and it's time to let it feast. Stop and working 9 to 5, it's the end of the week. Party with the keys, sipping to the beat. Siesta on the beach. Maybe we just animals, winding up and letting go. Chasing down the good life, this is what it feels like.
There's one question everyone keeps asking me and it's driving me nuts. Is the Norden 901 Expedition a dark blue KTM890 Adventure R?
Welcome to Mad TV, and we go to extremes to give you the best in terms of testing bikes. And today we're testing the Husqvarna Norden 901 Expedition, and we've got it on a precipice, and that's what we do, we go the extra mile. So if you're new to Mad TV, for goodness sake subscribe. We do bike tests, bike reviews and long form motorcycle adventure movies. Subscribe!
Time to test the 2023 Husqvarna Norden 901 Expedition. I've got less than a week with this bike, so I want to use my time wisely. I'm heading to those hills in the distance, part of the Great Dividing Range that stretches along the east coast of Australia for thousands of kilometres. This is where I grew up, and this is my backyard, and I know it well. The test of the bike will consist of long days in the saddle on a range of riding conditions, but the focus will be on the dirt. So this is what I found. You pay a couple of grand extra for a Norden Expedition over a standard Norden, but if you add up those features, there's a truckload of value for the money. But then again, there'd want to be. I've ranked the features in order of importance for me, someone who would use this bike for big mile adventures in the outback. With the exception of those side bags, which I'll talk about later, this bike is ready to go straight off the showroom floor. The Norden is a premium mid-sized adventure package that's on the upper end of purchase price, but you get a lot for your money. I would imagine that many will use this bike as a true dual sporter, commuting during the week and heading out on the weekends and for longer trips. The 900cc parallel twin handles the tedium of suburbia well. Whilst it punches out a maximum of 105 horsepower at 8,000 revs and 100 newton meters of torque at 6,500, the most useful feature of the engine for me is its linear smooth power delivery at low speed that becomes useful at around 2,800 revs, but its happy place is 3 and a bit thousand to 4 and a bit thousand revs. Whilst the handling of the bike is agile, a word of caution, I wouldn't suggest lane splitting with those panniers and racks on, or you're going to get hooked up in a traffic jam.
Starting up the Norden 901 Expedition for the first time. It's got 69 Ks on it, so nice and crisp and new. Really looking forward to testing this bike. You know, I spent a lot of time on the first Norden to come out, both in standard form and with upgraded suspension on it. I had two reservations about the bike, or two things that I just wasn't quite happy with for my style of riding, which is pretty strongly off-road focused, and that's the rear suspension. And the other thing was the screen. The front screen just had a very minor vibration. And you know, at 100 Ks, and it was just ever so slight.
In the dirt, and in combination with the power assist slipper clutch, power delivery of this engine is perfect. Whether it's slowly picking through a technical bit or blasting along in a paddock, there's power there when you want it, but it's also very controllable and useful in the slow technical stuff, which is more important for us, I think. And layered upon that is the Explorer package that most importantly gives you access to variable slip control that is incredibly useful in the dirt, For example, when climbing slippery hills when your road bias tyres are overinflated, and that's what I did, and I had a serious moment there. If I didn't have that variable traction control, I think I still would have been on that hill.
Yeah, slip control free for that, it's really good. Like it's a slippery, gravelly surface. Works great.
On stuff like this, slip control helps prevent you being bumped offline by a rock or some deeper gravel. It helps you hook up that rear wheel consistently. The suspension on the Expedition is the #1 standout feature for me. It's fully adjustable with 280 mils of front and rear travel, utilising the WP Explore 48mm open cartridge forks and the WP Explore PDS shock, which has both low and high speed compression damping. They are almost the same suspension setup that you'll find on the KTM890 Adventure R, but they are a tiny bit softer to soak up minor imperfections on track surfaces, which will suit me because if suspension can't cope with this sort of stuff, it wears you out on long rides. As we discovered, the bike wasn't dialed in for my weight and height, but access to preload, compression and rebound was effortless, and we tuned the bike on the trail by upping the preload for my bulky weight and adjusting all settings for the sport mode. Oh, this is the Husky 701 toolkit. But what I've got in here, there it is.
There it is, get those Allen key out, mate. That's the one.
Little key.
Let's get down to that shock absorber.
Let's have a look at this. Your preload is here. I don't know if you can see that well. Yeah, preload's there, and I'm just going to do that up. And it'll be pretty hard to do up. Like I've got it on the centre stand. And I'll just give it a few tweaks. I can see it moving as I'm doing that. There's a handy sticker on the airbox under the seat that provides those settings for you. 2, 3, 1. But once dialed in, wow, the suspension took anything I threw at it. It liberates this bike to reach its full handling capability. The bike is sold short with the STRs on it, the Pirelli STRs. They're a dual sport tyre, but they're road, focused. And this bike would come alive with rallies on it, Pirelli Rally Scorpions. They just really lift this bike in terms of its performance. But in terms of when you get a bike, at the end of the day, tyres are just a couple of weeks and you need a new set, so it's not that big a deal. The dirt handling of the bike is excellent and equivalent to the KTM890 Adventure R, even though frame geometry is slightly more road biased. That said, it's the big screen that will hold you back from going nuts in the dirt, in particular on short, sharp jumps, where the screen has a tendency to come very close to your helmet. Standing position on this bike is excellent. I don't mind the triangulation in the seat in terms of when I'm in dirt and going hard. I can grip the seat, so I'm quite happy with that. But what I would say is now that I've got the preload right for my weight, I cannot put 2 feet on the ground. So I'm on tiptoes and I'm balancing between two. If I let them go, they're both off the ground. I'm just sitting there. Now you could alter the preload and drop the preload, but that then starts reducing the performance of the suspension because you're not using the full stroke. But I think some people are going to need to do that to ride this bike competently in the bush. So what I find myself doing is jamming myself right up in here to get the narrowest part of the bike, and like that. The second you come back a bit, look, see that? I'm back, and that's what's happening. If I bring myself forward, the seat narrows. Anyway, it's just something to think about for those who are a little bit more vertically challenged than me. Remember, I'm 5'10" and a half, 5'10" or 11, 178 centimetres tall. For those a little shorter, there is a technical accessories lowering kit that I'd strongly suggest is worth considering. The bike is branded as an expedition, and to test it lives up to its name, you've got to spend big days in the saddle, in varied terrain, and that's what I've done. At the end of the day, ergos are a huge factor in a bike that's branded expedition. I can sit on this bike all day, and that's the trick to assessing ergos. After 10 hours in the saddle, little niggly things become irritations, and I'm pleased to say there is none on the Norden. It's comfortable in the standing and seated position, although I had considered rolling the handlebars a little forward when standing. Activation of controls are excellent. The light clutch and gear change quick shifter look after the rider, particularly at the end of the day when you're tired. The front and back brakes give good feel. They're not the most powerful out in the market, but they do alright. The front pair of 320mm floating disc brakes work well in the dirt and on the tar. And the rear 260mm brake had good feel and was useful to turn the bike in dirt in a controlled manner. And switch blocks are illuminated. The bike's ergos keep fatigue at bay. The traditional seated position where you're seated in the bike rather than on it provides additional protection from the elements around the legs. With its tall screen that provided smooth airflow around my helmet in all riding conditions, heated grips and seat, and comfortable foot pegs, the bike wrapped me in a cocoon of goodness. Reinforced by a very sophisticated traction control system that is packed with the latest Bosch technology that can save you and includes slip control, lean sensitive traction control and ABS, ride-by-wire throttle with EMS. Some of these terms may be unfamiliar, and I'd encourage you to look at them because they can save your bacon and work seamlessly with you and are almost barely detectable. And then we have protection of the bike with that bridge-like skid plate and very high air intake. I'll return to a little file footage to reveal how deep this bike can go.
My woofer valve is going like this, mate.
Mate, and it's wet. That's deep, mate. That was but over front wheel, not up to the base of the headlight and fairing, but that is
You
deep.
were deeper than that.
I know. I had it coming up over into my lap, mate.
Yeah, I was watching the water come up up.
Yeah, around the steering head and over.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, like, that's where Nick and I went to the left.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, if you're watching, mate, that's got a lot deeper.
Lighting on the bike is excellent, and the little driving lights are also excellent in the evening to spread the light into the bushes beside the road. It's really easy to get this bike off the centre stand. That's it, it's up. It's easy to get it off. The other thing I like about the centre stand is once it's up, it stays up, it doesn't flap around. It's excellent, keeps out of the road of anything that I hit during the week. I'll finish hitting some soft sand. The way it carved through the obstacle with the stability says a lot about this bike. It's ready for expedition.
Now, Clubby, if you just wanted to do that composition a bit better, if you take 3 steps that way, it'll look really good, but I think you may be dead at the end of that.
Yeah, anyway. The last time I stepped off this ledge, Dave, it was a Spot Tracker 000 evac, mate, so I'm not in a rush to repeat it.
In a ambulance?
Yeah, one of those. Now, Dave, we've been on our own little expedition.
This is an expedition.
On the Husqvarna Norden 901, and it's brought us here to the top secret, top of the rock film location.
Yep.
Now we need to talk about the bike, Dave. So let's start with some real quick first impressions to put the pressure on you.
Okay, there's a lot of people who think it's like a KTM890 There are similarities, but it's very different. The most important thing is the ergos is different. Husqvarna have listened, and I remember I'm not the only bloke who was saying it, there's a few, and they've changed the screen for this bike, for the Expedition. They've given it a whopping bash plate, and yeah, they've got all the goodies in terms of the traction control. Yeah, they've really tried hard. It's got a centre stand, and it's got pannier racks and panniers.
So what do you think is the most pertinent change to the Norden marketplace? Out of all those things, what's the most beneficial?
Well, it's interesting. I got mixed feelings about that. I'd have to say the two most beneficial is the centre stand and that bash plate. It's built like a bridge, and that really adventurizes the bike for the really tough going, like these rocks. I mean, to get this bike here, I mean, we use that bash plate. So the other thing is, yeah, the screen is an interesting one in that at high speed now, my helmet is completely stable. But along the way, a couple of other interesting things have happened. Like we were riding at 3 degrees today, and I stood up for a while, and that hole in there shoots the wind up into my helmet and was freezing my head. So when it's cold, you got to sit down. I also noticed when you were going in sand at a slower speed and churning it up, the sand would pop out through there and come up and come around my face. But I still like the screen. I think it's good. Those who ride dirt, I think, would find it a little bit intrusive. There was a jump I was doing yesterday, and I just felt it might hit me in the neck, and so I just eased back on the jump. I'd normally go that much harder. But at the end of the day, this is not a dirt bike. This is an explorer, an expedition bike.
So let's talk a little bit more about ergonomic factors, like you're alluding to there with the screen. What about your seating and your standing
Now,
position?
this is another thing. I was, if you go back and have a look at my review that I did it's about 2 years ago, which is in the top right of your screen now, you can just click on that if you want to go back and have a look. One of my prime criticisms was the suspension. I felt the frame geometry, the engine, everything else was good. So I said, Husky, for God's sake, put on some decent suspension, and they have, and it's great, and I've been really pushing it today, and it's great. But what it's done, it's risen the seat height, which you'd expect, all right? But along with that comes a couple of ergonomic challenges. This seat is very triangular, and I'm 5'11", 5'10", 178 centimetres tall. The way this is, if I don't have my body crammed up between the tank and the seat, my feet are just a little bit precarious in terms of where I'm putting my feet. So it feels a little bit too tall, and I don't know how I can have the audacity to say that, because I wanted this suspension on this bike and it's a cracker. So a couple of people are going to find that too tall, not because it's too tall, but because the seat broadens out very quickly, and that lifts the inner parts of your thighs out. So, yeah, I think a few people are going to get on this bike and go, oh, it feels a bit too tall for me.
All right, now the other big inclusion with the Expedition model, it's the luggage rack and panniers. Now, we've had our own technical challenges this weekend, haven't we, with them?
Yeah, look, let's put it out there. The luggage just failed within, I don't know, 10 kilometres of us being in the dirt. The seam went, and some of the actual lugs that hold it to the frame broke. I never ever saw it as a heavy duty luggage system. I never saw it like that. We had 1 kilo and a bit in one rack, and in the other pannier we had just about 2 kilos. And I was just going over bumps, and you can see that when we show you the video, and it just broke straight away, which was a little bit disappointing. But at the end of the day, I was never going to use that luggage to go on a long ride. That's the first thing. The next thing is the pannier racks themselves, and again, full ticks for Husky for thinking about pannier racks. The problem is the design of them is very specialised for this particular luggage, and there's what we call adventure racks, and they've got a square design, and that means they can universally fit anything. And I think Husky have just missed the mark with that, because people aren't, if they're going to put this on an Expedition, they're not going to use these small panniers. They're going to put decent soft panniers on it. And I think there was an opportunity there for Husky just to make square panniers. Look, it's disappointing for this. I mean, for a user experience, you've got this cracking bike. Husky have listened to us on everything that we talked about, and then these soft panniers just let it down. I'd strongly recommend, if you were going to take those panniers in the dirt, the maximum you put in there is 2 sandwiches on this side and 600 mils of water on the other, and that's all I'd put in there. And I'm not being smart, I'm being dead set serious. They can't take any weight at all.
All right, let's continue the capacity theme. Now, the fuel tank.
Yeah.
We understand that this is actually a litre smaller capacity than the KTM comparable models.
Always has been, and that was about the design. And I, when I first assessed this bike, when they first came out, I thought that was a good idea. It made it look slimmer. But it's interesting, with this big bash plate, it's gone chunky again, but I love it. I reckon it's a great improvement. And a litre, it doesn't matter. Like, with the fuel economy on the dirt and in the road, I think I'm at around 4.5 litres per 100. So that would put me coming in around 400 k's range, and to me, that's fine. I don't care about that litre.
All right, now you briefly touched on suspension. I think that's an important aspect of this bike to delve into a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so when we got the bike, the suspension wasn't set up for my weight, nor my purpose, nor my style. And you'd expect that because it's completely adjustable. So the first thing we did was hooked into the preload. Now it's fully adjustable, so on the rear it was way too soft, and we just wound up the preload. And we got that pretty well right very quickly. But what that did was then put out the compression and rebound damping, and we went back, and last night we hooked into it and put the sports settings on it. And the settings, you'll find under here, there's a sticker on the airbox, and you'll find the different settings. So we put this bike on the sports setting, front and rear. And I've just been coming up this hill. I won't say where we are because this is our secret precipice, but it's a decent hill. And, jumping it, lifting it, and what I found was the suspension spot on. It's brilliant.
How big an upgrade is that compared to the previous model?
I think this is a huge upgrade. I think in terms of value for money, it's sitting now, I think, at 27 and a bit for this. So about 2,000 more for the Expedition over the standard Norden. And there's a lot of value there to be had. I mean, you think about it, the center stand, that, heated grips, heated seat, beautiful. This fairing, you get the full kit, so you get the quick shifter and a whole range of other things in the traction control. So you get the Explorer mode. There'll be things I missed. You get the pannier racks. It's a good package for the price, that increased price of $2,000. You couldn't do that, I don't think, for $2,000. So it's good value.
Let's talk about brakes, Dave. Now, they look like Brembo brakes, but they're not Brembo brakes, are they?
We spend a lot of time on bikes, Cobby, and a number of bikes are fitted out with Brembo brakes at the moment. And I'd have to say they are the outstanding category in terms of brakes. These brakes are good, but in all honesty, they're not quite as good as Brembo. I don't know if they're Brembo lookalike, I don't know, but I don't think they're quite as, don't have quite as much feel, but they're fine. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's the upper echelon of things. They're fine.
It's still got the same electronic controls and options, haven't you?
Yeah.
As the Orange brand.
So this, let's be clear on this. The traction control, the ABS, this is the top tier of traction control and ABS. And, it's up there, well, it's equivalent to the KTM. It's also up there with other bikes, BMW and Ducati. Those 4 brands have the ultimate in terms of lean sensitive traction control generally, and ABS, off-road ABS. They've nailed that, those 4 brands. But there is a difference between this one and the other in terms of the language to get into it. And I'd have to say the Husky language to actually get access to these on the fly is simple and brilliant. It's literally just a couple of clicks away, and you can reconfigure the bike. The thing that I find when we're coming up this steep hill now is with the traction control, slip control, we had STR tyres on it, and I'll get onto them in a minute. So not quite as much grip, you know, a dual sport tyre with more road orientation. So I knew it would be slippery on this slippery ascent we just did. So what I did, I can just quickly on the fly here, just alter the slip control. And I actually took it to 3 or 4 at times. And that just assisted me getting up this hill. If I would have not had traction control with those tyres at those inflations, I would have done one of those old ones where you go up like that and go, and that's where I would have stayed until I got going again.
All right, summary time, Dave. How do you wrap up the Norden 901 expedition?
Well, I think the first thing we do is we give Husqvarna a huge tick for listening to riders. There was a lot of discussion when the Norden came out, and they've listened. The suspension's upgrade on the Expedition, it's fantastic, it's outstanding. But they've also listened in terms of the screen, and they've added things to this bike that make the value for that premium price. The heated grips, the heated seat, the traction control, the whole Explore mode comes at standard. Mate, I think they've nailed it for what it says on the packet there. Expedition. This bike is capable of an expedition anywhere.
So if I'm heading out to Cameron Corner in a fortnight, Dave, are we taking 2 expeditions or what?
We could easily take, I'd take an expedition across the Simpson. That's how confident I am. I think they handle the sand well, provided they had Pirelli rallies on them. Yeah, but we'll, you know, we'd piss Cameron Corner in, Clubby. We'd do that in a heartbeat. That's not a problem.
All right, final words, Dave. Anything else you've missed, mate? Any other points?
It takes humility to listen, and I think that's what Husqvarna have done. They've listened to riders and created this expedition. And, you know, it's just small steps. Yeah, look, don't cry about the bags, Husky. You know, that bit hasn't worked, but the bike has worked. But unfortunately, that's going to be a user experience, and I think it's to the detriment of what is a fantastic package.
Now, Dave, we've been out a couple of days. We've been posting on the socials, and they're already smashing us with the one question to be expected.
Yeah.
How does the Expedition compare to the good old KTM890 Rally?
Honestly, that is the only question out there. How does it compare? And you know, our listeners know, Clubby, that we've spent a heap of time on, you know, that bike, the KTM890 and 790. We've spent a heap of time on that over the years. So we've got a good understanding of that, and we've spent a heap of time on the Norden. The first point I want to make is people say, oh, it's just a KTM. It's not. The ergos are completely different. Yeah, the engine is the same, but not even the frame geometry is the same. And a lot of journalists miss that. This has a different frame geometry that allows it to tip into corners better. So on the road. So it's got a slight more road orientation. So this is how I'd sum it up. If I wanted to ride a big dirt bike all the time and then have the flexibility to drive halfway across New South Wales reasonably comfortably, I'd take the 890. But if I wanted to do something a little bit longer and really explore the place, particularly Australia, punching out big miles, this punches out big miles comfortably, standard. So you've got to compare this with the Adventure R. You can't just compare this with the Adventure. So it's great value if you're a little bit tiny more road oriented, but as you'll see from the video, mate, we hit the dirt on this and it's very capable.
Sounds like a wrap, Dave.
Yeah, it is a wrap. Look, I've got 2 Huskies in the garage. I've got the 701 and 501, and this bike could form the trio quite easily. So yeah, I know it's a good bike.
All right, I've got one last question, Dave.
Yeah.
How the hell do we get down off this cliff?
Oh, Clubby, the sweat and tears we went to get this bike. And Rosie, if it drops off the cliff, we'll call it for helicopters because that's what we'll need. We're not going to get it off here.
All right, well, I'm following you, Dave. You're leading down, all right?
I'm allergic to this. I'm going to sneeze in a minute. Woo! That concludes it.
Do you use Brill cream, Dave?
No, I don't use Brill
Well,
cream.
what's going on with your hair?
I don't know. Where's my bike?
Now, we got the bike out, Dave,
We did.
and it was a bit of a power lift, which brings me to one point that we didn't touch on,
Yeah.
the weight of the Norden
Yeah, Norden Expedition.
Expedition.
Yeah.
Now, everyone keeps coming back to the 890. It's not the same weight as an 890, is it?
No. The Norden Expedition is 10 kilograms more than the Norden. But you might go, oh, 10 kilograms. But let's think about that 10 kilograms, because most of the weight that they've put on it is low. It's that bash plate that's bulletproof, and you know, I reckon that's fantastic. So I don't mind the weight on that. It's the center stand, that's probably another 1.5 kilos, 2 kilos. That's brilliant. And it's the pannier racks. Now, again, the pannier racks may not quite suit everyone. I can imagine some people doing some welding to make them square. But yeah, that's where the weight is. And you know, when you're setting up a bike for an expedition, you know, when it's a long ride, you need those things.
It's time to get going. It's time to move on. Put this behind me. That day is gonna come.